Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Good to see you again. Here we go. This will be a little different in terms of me trying to be technologically savvy, which I'm not, and play things. And I'm just going to apologize in advance. Also, if I'm talking too fast, if I've gotten too excited about something, please maybe send a message in the chat or let me know. It's not my intent. I know it's something that I'm working on, but it is happening. So with that, Supriya is with us again. Supriya, say hello or whatever you want to say.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again. This is the second month we are doing this with NTN, and thank you, Mike, and thank you, NTN, for hosting this.
And here we go again. So today we're going to talk about CPNs. And what I want to do or try to do very quickly is play a quick little clip from kind of a commercial from Experian. And Experian is one of the three credit bureaus. I don't think you're going to get any audio out of this. If you do, fantastic. But I think you'll get the gist of it if I do this right. Supriya, can you see this?
Not yet.
Oh, perfect.
Maybe April needs to share the screen or something.
I got it. I thought I was sharing already.
Okay. Yes, now. I see it now.
So here's just a quick kind of, we used to talk about Vacation, the movie, years and years ago, and where you would go and get yourself a fake ID, and it's hilarious. But finding a clip of that to show you is pretty difficult. This is kind of where we're at today in 2020. And so hopefully I'm back, and that's kind of where we've come, where it's that easy to start to basically create yourself a new identity, and that's largely what a CPN is. And we've got a few questions we're going to kind of pose and talk about, and in the end we'll have a sample of an actual CPN in use. An applicant tried to use it, and what they look like. And with that, so what exactly does CPN stand for? What is a CPN? So we'll start with what does it stand for? CPN is a credit privacy number. The FTC says they're fraudulent, but they're being used out there, and they're being used out there a lot. Kind of think of it as a fake Social Security number. And there's bits and pieces of it that we'll talk about how they're created. But I thought when I was talking to Supriya before that she had actually experienced these in her history, and I think I misunderstood her. But anyhow, she's also familiar with CPNs, and I think for now I'll turn it over. And what do you want to say about CPNs?
Okay, so thank you, Mike. Sorry, I was probably not paying attention. So CPN, like Mike said, the easy part is what it stands for. It's a credit privacy number, and it's also 9 digits, similar to the Social Security number, and we can use that instead of the Social Security number, and that's one thing. But they are not legal. It's a federal crime if someone comes to you and tries to use a CPN, and they try to use that in lieu of a Social Security number. So they're supposed to use the Social Security number, and it is a scam. So there are companies that tell people that it's legal to use a CPN, but really it's not. It's not legal to use CPN in place of a social security number. And I think what Mike was referring to, what he said that I had seen earlier was, we ran the credit of somebody and it seemed like a legitimate social security number, but it turned out that they said this person was born in the 1960s and he was a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old at most young gentleman. And that's when Mike and I talked about that. And he probably thought it might be a CPN he was using, but it turned out that it was probably he was using uh, the social security of his father or something. Somehow things had got mixed up. So that's when he and I first discussed CPNs.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that doesn't happen a lot anymore, but files can be merged. And what I say back in the day, 20 years ago, that's something you could pretty readily and easily do. The bureaus weren't as sophisticated as they are today, technologically speaking, and you could almost create. It was really quick. You could drop your first name, use your middle name, flip two numbers in your social, etc., and generate yourself a brand new identity. It doesn't work like that anymore. But the CPN usage, especially with what we're going through right now with COVID and all these other things, and we're not seeing each other face to face as much as we used to. CPNs are really, really starting to affect the industry. So another question: we know what a CPN is, or we have an idea of what a CPN is. So exactly how are they created? And statistically, we'll talk about 2018 because I've got those stats in front of me. And think of the data breaches that we've all heard of. There was a Target incident. There was an Equifax incident. There's another one I'm not thinking of. Somebody else large, maybe it was Facebook or somebody like that. But there were data breaches, and what I found out were those were about a 3% of all the data breaches that affected consumers in the year 2018. And so what's happening is they're not going in and what we'll call breachers. They're not going in and taking a whole file from someone. They're going in and grabbing bits and pieces of different files. And so they start to put them together. They've gotten sophisticated enough that what's happening is they're even reaching out to folks they find that have fantastic credit. And they say, hey, listen, we know you're going to pay your I keep wanting to say invoices because I get invoices too often, but we know you're going to pay your bills. So would you be willing to allow us to share your credit with someone else? And so what they'll then do is turn to folks that they're targeting that don't have good credit or that are starting to create a CPN. They are then selling that authorized user status to someone. And there's an entire process of how this happens, and we can go into it in an actual maybe a webinar just about CPNs, and not. This is going to be a much sort of shorter. Let's go over questions and not bury everyone concept or I don't want to call it class, but just webinar. We can talk about that. It's and the breaches are everywhere. They're not just in the United States. They're coming from all over the world. Sure, we're a large part of it, but we're not all of it. And so if you imagine those big companies that we've talked about, we're part of it. We've heard of those. Imagine all we haven't heard of, and that's 97% of all the breaches. I don't have statistics yet from 2019, but I bet it's just as rampant, if not more. And 2020, I don't even want to think about what might happen. So, anything to add? Any? I guess I should say, if there's questions coming in, this is kind of a tough topic sometimes.
It is. I had a question just when you were talking about all that. If someone with good credit, if they are able to use their credit for someone with bad credit, won't the name come up if they're using that number?
So,
won't it say it belongs to someone else?
That's a great question. So what they'll become is they're actually the good credit person is allowing the company to provide the bad credit individual with. They're making him an authorized user, kind of like if I wanted to give one of my kids some credit And I don't, but if I did, I would make them an authorized user on one of my accounts. And it's the same kind of scenario.
Okay.
So it's not associated at all. They
Understood.
become an authorized user. And that's how that works without being related at all. It's just, it's these companies are, I mean, there's companies out there that are trying to franchise CPN, whatever, farming or whatever the right word is. They're trying their best to really get these out there. And you can go and purchase a vehicle, and I know most of us aren't in that industry, but you can go out and use the CPN, usually purchase a car and roll away. And if the number's under $50,000 for whatever reason, that's it. That I don't know why, but that's what I've seen, and they just walk away. That's just a loss. So it's starting to really affect the real estate industry as well. But does that answer your question, I hope?
Yes, it does. That
Okay,
makes
excellent.
sense. They're an authorized user on their credit.
And if you kind of think, getting a little bit more into how they work or how they're formed, what a lot of these companies are going to teach you or teach that individual is, so they'll be kind of like they're the farmer, and so they're going out and teaching you to get bits and pieces. We'll get a date of birth from over here and an address or two from over there and a social, and if you don't bring along your own. And they also teach you, if possible, find the social security number of someone who's been, who's deceased, or more importantly and more readily available are your children. And unfortunately, children are becoming part of this scam. And a lot of these videos that we've seen, I've watched during research, their position is, don't worry, they're young children. By the time that they might be affected, it won't affect them anymore. And so now we've got children that their credit files that shouldn't be credit files have been generated, and they're starting to be affected as well. And that's just kind of that's what's happening.
So
Sorry.
will NTN be able to identify a CPN if somebody
screening
got that number?
companies. Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no. Screening companies in general, because it's data that's being input into a system, and there's no way. And we'll show a sample report that a little bit later on, I think, that is what it looked like when I had the phone rang and I picked it up and someone wanted to know what this was now, because I don't think I did it this time, but Lifestyles Unlimited, fantastic mentoring group. Lots of members are here as well. And thank you. And if you're interested in real estate and you've not heard of Lifestyles Unlimited, you should. And look them up. You'll find them. You won't be disappointed. But anyway, the phone rang, and it was one of their mentors, and they posed a question. It's been about 18 months ago, and the question was, how are you going to handle CPNs? Now, thankfully, one day previously, the National Apartment Association put out their white paper on CPNs, and so the wheels were already turning. What can we do? How can we stop these things from being used? And so that's kind of where we're at, and why we want to start talking about CPNs to folks, because there are ways to stop the CPNs usage before you even get to that screening company's process. And so that's kind of why we want to just start to help people understand CPNs are being used. And again, the more and more that I think that I don't know what the right words are, but stuck at home or desensitized from being face to face with others. I think if you go on social media and you say something you probably wouldn't say to somebody face to face, that happens far too often. And I think we're getting to that point. And so you think, well, gee, I'll just use this fake number because nobody's going to ever know it's me, or whatever. I don't want to hate to put words in people's mouths, or in their heads, but that's what I think is happening more and more and more, because we're seeing numbers of these things going up steadily. And it may just be because people, They just, they're at a position where they've got to do this, or they feel like they've got to do that. Use them. So that's kind of that's a great question. I appreciate you asking that. Actually, looking through some of these questions just to make sure I've got them. I think that one of the questions, and maybe I'll throw this to you. We've kind of talked about it, Supriya, but not exactly. And that's this: how are we seeing any of us seeing CPNs actually affect the real estate industry? And I'll just throw that to you.
I haven't seen the usage yet, so I might ask you what you're seeing, because because if somebody brought me a CPN, like you said, I wouldn't know, like this person I called you about.
Mm-hmm.
But I would run the screening thinking that was a social security number, and it might come back from NTN saying he has great credit, he or she has great credit. So I think how it could affect us is we might think it's somebody has good credit and approve them to move into an apartment, whereas they probably collections and bad credit.
That's exactly what's happening, is that you get somebody who comes during the start of the process. You're going to see somebody who has basically nothing, no records found, and this happens often. And is it because they don't actually have credit, or is it because they're hiding credit and using something like a CPN? Before the advent, I don't know, let's say even 5 years ago, and maybe it's even shorter than that, you see these things pop up and you go, oh, somebody used a fake social. Well, there was nothing actually really out there that we could name and we could talk about. We just knew they were flipping the numbers around or something. And to think that this concept of using your child's social security number is new, it's not. I can't tell you how many times over the years we've seen it before. You're referencing, looking through the application, they might list a child and they list their social security numbers out, et cetera. And there it is. And you figure it out. But there was nothing as sophisticated as this that I'm aware of before. And so again, we're seeing that happen and more and more. So,
so how many have you seen, Mike? So the people using CPNs in the real estate, how many have you seen, and how does how do we in the real estate industry, somebody who's screening, how do we identify, or what can you do to help us, or what can we do to help ourselves?
Sure. I mean, I think that to actual numbers, I don't know how many actual numbers I've seen. I can tell you and we'll look at the sample. Maybe this is a good time to do that. Looking at the sample of when this happened. So we started working on this, I think it was March-ish of 2019. By June, as we're starting to put something together, I saw my very first one. It was June or July. And so that was number one. And I started to see them. It's been accelerating upwards, but again, I can't necessarily say for sure it's them because we haven't. That process, I know it was just based on what we did in the background to kind of get through it. And in fact, I as I dug through that, when we found out this individual had changed their date of birth, this person had numerous charges, whether they be misdemeanors or felonies of altering documents, falsifying information. And so it even solidified more. That's what was going on here. But are there ways, is there a way to identify them? There are. I think the first step is, we talked about this a little bit last time, is just to add a little bit of time to that process where we're getting documents from, and we're asking questions. And I know, again, I'll tell you that pushing the easy button is fantastic. We all want to do it. Push it. Oh, got my reports. We're done. And we just take them at face value, right? I mean, we're all busy. I know how busy you are, Supriya. That just kind of goes with the territory. But again, we want to do it. But if we could spend a couple minutes here or a couple minutes there, I think that we're able to save ourselves some time. In the long run, we're able to help our investors, save our investors some money, because again, the investors there's a reason that they're investing, and they've done that. So and that's just the first step. I think of just being able to identify it even before we get to a process where we're looking to activate a pre-screening process, or now we've done that. Now we're moving to the actual screening process. And so I just think it's a sort of a step-by-step, where I'm not suggesting we take hours of time. Also, if something doesn't feel right when you've gotten through that process and you've got your screening reports or results, we should be able to talk to somebody about it. Certainly, I'm available to chat, but more importantly, there's lots of folks out there that call your get with your screening company and talk to them about the results you have. You may not like what you hear. It may be something's happened with the input, or we used to date this process. Years and years ago, we would get faxes coming in, and we would call the client and say, "Well, I can't read this." Well, if you couldn't read it before you sent it to us, I can assure you we can't read it now that we have it. And so it was this, well, what do you mean you can't read it? And again, stop them. And again, applying electronically is fantastic. But if something doesn't seem to make sense, don't jump into the next step and get there. One of the things, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but one of the things we want to talk about is true and verified. And true and verified is a system that when that phone rang, we start to work on to put in place that will help you to identify CPN's usage or to identify their usage. So, excuse me. And that's a great step to take, because they can't confirm their identity, then they're not who they say they are. And in fact, Supriya, way back whenever that was last fall, we used that to help to prove, because I think we both believed that applicant, I don't want to say his name, that we believed he was who he said he was, and we believed that he wasn't trying to do something he shouldn't have been doing. But we were able to help him prove that, you know what, it is you. And I'd like to think we've, you read it, everything's good, and I think it is. I haven't heard otherwise, but don't tell me if it.
Yes. We suspected it was CPN first when we saw that strange screening report, and Mike helped me, because what true and verified is, it's an additional step where Mike will help send a series of other questions that only that individual will know the answers to. So for those of you who are wondering what is true and verified, that's the next step in this. So if you suspect something like this, ask your screening company to send them those true and verified questions, or NTN will do it. And I talked to Mike, and he sent them the questions that only he would know the answer to. For instance, where he lived when he was 12 years old, or some other thing, right? It's a list of questions, and he answered all those truthfully. So we were able to verify that it was him.
It's something to do. And again, it should be a step before you can do it two ways. When you get your results from your screening company and something doesn't jive, you could send them there. What I would suggest is that before you even bother with the screening process, is have an applicant confirm he or she is who he or she says they are, or he or whatever. And now whatever you get back, that is that applicant's information. That would be just to stop the process before it starts. That's
how do we do that, Mike? How do we send them to true and verified even before we start the screening process? And
that's another conversation. That's okay. You could say, hey, go to true and verified, and send them there, and they'll get proof, or they'll be verified. That's something they can do. There's lots of various steps that can be taken to get that done. And believe me, there are many. It's just a matter of confirming identity now, and a redirection happens. So true and verified. It's not a screening company. Just an identity verification process.
And do all screening companies have the ability to use that, Mike?
Sure. There's yes. And what if everybody's good with this? Why don't we take a look at one? and
Yes.
kind of what it looks like. And again, bear with me as I try to share my screen. Okay, so Supriya, can you see this?
I can see it.
Okay, so yes, lots of the pertinent information is kind of grayed out on purposes you can probably imagine. But some of the interesting things here is, and I want to point out, you've got 7 total accounts, and they're current accounts. But what's really interesting is you've got 48 inquiries total, and this is inquiries last, if you will, for they're recorded for a period of 24 months. 48 inquiries in 24 months is a lot. It really is, but there could be reasons for that. Now, inquiries in the last 6 months, that same 48, that's where we got really suspicious. And so that kind of started the process. If you've ever seen anything like this, a great red flag on a screening report is going to be inquiries in a very, very short period of time. And you'll see the 6 months mark usually. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, as we talked about a little bit, or I tried to talk about a little bit, you've got companies out there that are connecting good credit with bad in the sense of an authorized user. And so in this case, we saw these authorized users. I think it was 6, but we've pictured, what is that, 5? But a lot of authorized users. And what that eventually does is it gives that individual the opportunity. Now they've started to sort of build credit and get their own credit, or build credit to a point where they can go and grab or buy their own trade line and connect it to their credit file. And so that's what you see here. A number of authorized users, again, they're not using these cards or these accounts. They're just listed as an authorized user, and therefore increases their credit score.
Okay.
And then this is just some of this is the inquiry screen, and that's a list of all those inquiries that we saw in that brief period of time. And it was about a month, as I recall. The applicant was about 40 or so. So we were really like, what do you mean you don't have credit? And all of a sudden, in the last 6 months, it just came up. So that was that was the indicator that started us looking even more into that. So questions that you have, Supriya, that we can generate that others probably have about this before I squash the sample?
No, this is really useful, because what I always look at, I do look at the number of inquiries, I do look at the number of trade lines and all that, but until now I've never seen the authorized use, so that'll be very useful. I'll start looking for that next time, and this is useful to me as well. So you also showed us where that'll be used. I look at collections, I look to see real estate balance. These are the typical things I always look for, but this authorized use that's something I'm going to start looking for.
That might be, actually, now that you mention it that way, when you've got your screening reports, if you've got an abundance of authorized user accounts, and that we're talking about somebody who's maybe beyond school age. What I mean by that is you could be a student and an authorized user on your parents' or a parent's account. That wouldn't necessarily be uncommon. But a bunch of these, and this person's not what I would consider school age. And I understand, and more power to you. Go back to school anytime. Do it. Whatever benefits you should do it. But just in general, thinking there's a school age usually, and this applicant was not. So that's great.
Yes, and the report also usually has at what point in time they started their credit, and usually I look at to see when were they born, and is it around 18 years. Usually I start seeing that if they were born in the year 2000, then I see around 2018 or something. That's when they first established credit. But if somebody was born a long time ago and they're establishing credit only now, where have they been all these years?
That's and that's something because there was an age group that really paid cash. They didn't establish credit for much at all, and they're starting to fade off into the sunset. And they're just we don't see that a lot anymore, like we used to. And so that kind of group is again, they're not active, and so it's very odd. I probably say this every day. It's really odd to me when I see someone who's been in the world a number of years, maybe 20 plus years in the world. Even if they have all bad credit, they have some kind of credit. And when you don't have the credit, they're like you said, there's just always a real question mark in my mind is why is that?
True. In mine too, I always raise questions there, and doesn't quite look right. I'm like, you're 40 years old, 50 years old, and you don't have any credit anywhere, and so that's something I look for.
And I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I've never seen having credit or not having credit being a protected class. So you can tell someone no based on that fact. So not you can ask about it. All right. Anything else you think we should mention on the CPN?
No, I think this was good. So
Okay.
we can talk. We can go to the next questions or the next sections, and then open it up for questions.
That I don't really have anything else. I don't know if we have any questions at all.
Okay.
But we certainly we will be doing something longer and more detailed, and showing exactly how these things are done in the future. But right now, wanting to make sure everybody identifies that CPNs are alive and well, so to speak. That's what we're trying to do, and make sure people know.
So just to summarize, Mike, just so, and if I say anything incorrectly, you can repeat that for everyone who's joined today. So one is that these are also 9-digit numbers, just like Social Security numbers, and screening companies are not able to stop it. If it happens, you have no clue, and we don't either unless we look closely at the screening report. Correct? And these are not legal. So if someone brings us a CPN and say, I'm using a CPN, will they ever say it, Mike? Will they ever say, I'm using a CPN, and then you can say, no, I don't accept it?
I don't know, because when you go through some of these what am I trying to say? Go through some of these companies online, and you're like, well, they make you think it's completely legal, and it's not legal. And so you go, well, what do you mean? What am I doing wrong here? And to me, anyhow, if they think they're doing what they should be doing, then there'll be no reason why they think they shouldn't be doing that. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's the summary I had. That's my takeaway from this.
Yeah, they're just to answer your question. Yeah, they are 9 digits, and oftentimes they are legitimate Social Security numbers. They're just not that individual's.
Hey, Mike, we do have a couple questions.
Excellent.
So the first question is, how about driver's license, identification card, and Social Security cards? That's what the question says. So I'm not sure if they're asking, are those things you should be looking at, or how would those affect identifying a CPN?
So if that's the question, how can those, I mean, anytime, whether you're dealing with a CPN or Social Security number, anytime, any additional information that you might receive, you might get your hands on, great place to start. Have I seen people that are currently going through the process and have been to a point where they've applied recently? I haven't seen that, but I can tell you I've been through it directly. Years ago, it was pretty commonplace to head to the flea market, pick up your new identity pack, and come and apply. And the funny stories about going through that and listening to applicants talk and joke around and think they've got you, and then you say something to them, and whatever language they might have been speaking, and they're like, oh, you mean, and this didn't work. I can tell you there have been lots of watch the news or frankly don't watch the news. But if you do watch the news, there are identity theft rings that are making documents all over the place. It's happening more and more and more. And these things people are getting more and more, or maybe I should say criminals are getting more and more sophisticated. And so we will see in the future, it's my belief, you will see documentation going along with your CPN. It will happen.
Mm-hmm. And
Hope that answered.
I might want to add one more thing to the driver's license question. I don't know who asked that question, but I don't know if this is what they were getting at. So there is a way to verify driver's license. At least I know Texas has a website, the DPS site, and Florida has one too. So I always verified. One of my steps, in addition to the screening and the rental verification, income verification, contacting the employer, contacting the previous management companies and current ones, is verifying their driver's license on the Texas DPS site. So basically it asks you a couple of things. It asks you for the last four of the social, their date of birth and their name, and it tells you if there is a match. So that I have caught people using a false social security number when I give the date of birth and their name. They say there's no such person, they don't exist. So that's again, I'd urge everyone to do that as well. Use as many tools as you can to know if this is the person who's applying to your apartment.
Tools, right? Yeah. It's probably every single day. Or we're looking something up with a driver's license, whether it be in Texas or you're right, Florida. We used to have access to a whole lot more, but states have decided that we shouldn't have access to that information. So it's tougher to get. But if you know where to look, or you know some guy named Mike or Supriya, you might find what you're looking for. Any other questions, April?
Yes, we've got a few more that have come in. The next question is, where do you go to get the CPN number? Is it something that you look up online, or does it show up in background checks?
Okay, so starting with if I understand the question correctly, which is how would one get a CPN, I think is what I heard. And the answer is oftentimes they're from a deceased person or they're from a child. Not all the time, but the highest percentage of time is they're from children or from somebody they found a deceased, and oftentimes a family member. But there are cases if you learn a little more about them, and just be careful because you're going to start to see, we learned this the hard way, put in CPN or credit privacy number into a Google or whatever you use for searching. You've got all the cookies enabled. You're going to start seeing CPN everywhere. It pops up everywhere. But there are some really, really exciting videos out there. And in the longer class, we talk about, we show some of those samples or examples, and you'll see guys all in their suit and tie and with a facade of this wonderful bookshelf, and it's you can get them from there. But my point is, it's oftentimes those numbers are legal, and this is kind of a process of helping you take a social security number that is legitimate, it doesn't belong to you, and creating an identity, a new identity for that legitimate social security number, if that makes sense.
So, Mike, so is it true that there are companies that sell these? So maybe the person who was asking the question was asking, where does one go to get it? Maybe that's what they were asking. Where do you go?
Yes.
So there are companies that sell these numbers. So you can go to a company if you want to create a fake identity, and they'll sell you a CPN number. They'll for it, and that's how one will get a.
Got it.
CPN
I missed that
number.
part of the question. Absolutely. And there's those same companies are out there saying, "Oh, would you like to have a credit score of pick a number?" Well, that if this is the number you want, the trade line is X dollars. Let's say $200-300. Oh, you want a credit score with this number? Oh, that's $500. And we found some systems, some sites that they would do specials, and today's special is get a credit score of this, and this is after, because you can actually go and they'll walk there. there are sites they'll walk you through how to do this. Once you have the CPN and you want to start from scratch, say you go and take I don't know, you get a social security number, and let's say it's legitimate social security number, just doesn't belong to the applicant. The first step in the process is you go anywhere and you apply. Once you've applied, you know you're going to be turned down, but then you turn to Credit Karma or one of the other reporting, but Credit Karma is one of those that's oftentimes named, and you start to have your credit monitored for a few months, and then there's the next step. Look to find an authorized user, and on it goes. There's almost a step process on how to do this, and that's kind of what really piqued our interest as we started to go. We've got to find a way to stop, because at this point we don't know what to do. We started getting this out, and I kept following the word scary, and scary is not the right word, because it just doesn't do it justice. Until you find out what it's like to have been hit with somebody who moves in, and many of you have. Think of that renter who moved in, destroyed the place, you didn't collect rent for months. Imagine that, and you thought you'd done everything right. I think we've probably always taken it. Every one of us, or at least I have. Let's focus on me. I have taken a chance I should not have taken, doing this for all these years and lost money, and was mad at myself for what? Making the wrong decision. That's one thing. But thinking you made the right decision is completely different based on fraudulent information.
Thanks, Mike. We have a few questions here asking, what do you do if you have a potential resident using a CPN? Do you report it somewhere? How do you handle that situation?
My suggestion there would be there is no that I'm aware of, and I think there probably will be at some point. There's no bureau of CPN usage, but I would probably contact just local law enforcement, ring the phone, and just see what direction they might give you. There are identity theft departments typically, and they would probably be able to help you know what to do. I haven't personally seen anyone yet charged with of CPN, or from it. That's a great question, by the way.
Thanks, Mike. So we have another question here that says, I'm a bit confused, but it sounds like property managers now must be suspicious of social security number on every rental application we receive. Is this true? Also, are there screening companies, specifically NTN, that are able to identify a CPN versus social security number? And then lastly, what steps do you recommend property managers take to ensure the number is a legitimate social security number?
That's a lot of questions all in one. So the first, and Supriya, jump in anytime you want, because we're both asking some of these things you can speak to better than I. But the first, I think, question is, should you be suspicious every time you get an application? I think that my response is going to be yes. I have learned over the years. Yes. I have learned over the years that I believe applicants are liars, and they're lying to me, and it's my job to prove them innocent. In other words, I want to prove that I'm wrong and they're right and they're not lying to me. And so that's how I view it, and sort of work backwards through that process to see, look, they're fantastic, and they've proven themselves to be, a great risk. I think before I run on my mouth some more, Supriya, want to add anything?
No, that's exactly how I view it too. Everything they say on there, I'm looking at it, like the report, whether it's their date of birth or their social security number, their driver's license. I verify everything. Everything is as though I don't believe them until they're proven innocent. I'm looking at every single thing, their income, their rental history. So that's the answer to question number one. And I think April had many other questions. I might have.
There were.
You might need to repeat. There were 4 questions in there, I think.
Yeah. Might be good. would you do that, please?
No
Can you
problem.
please?
So the second question was, are the screening companies, specifically NTN, able to identify a CPN versus a social security number?
No.
No, not. I mean, the example, just to talk about NTN, the example that was provided was an NTN report, and we were able to identify it after the fact. But there are no systems in place to say, this number does not belong to that person, because the way that kind of the bureaus work is that you're taking the information that you're given and you're submitting it to the bureau. So if the bureau doesn't know, so let me back up. So there's no pre-system in place to say that doesn't belong to that person. And so it gets submitted to the bureau, and then it comes back and a no record found, or what we saw a little bit ago sampled, that now we know it's a CPN, but we didn't know it before. If that answers your question.
Thanks, Mike and Supriya. So the last part of that question is, what steps do you recommend property managers take to ensure a number is a legitimate social security number?
Supriya, you want to start or just answer?
Again, there's really not much we can do to say to verify that it is a legitimate when they come and apply. There could be a question that you ask on your application saying, is this a social security number you're providing? Maybe that can be an additional step. But once they provide it to you in place of the social security number field, and they provide a CPN, it's a federal crime. That's number one. And so we can't prevent them from doing that, but somewhere in our rental criteria, it might be good to mention that if you provided this, it is a federal crime and your application will be rejected. I would definitely do that as a property manager. I would add that in my rental criteria and and maybe in the application also saying, this field is only for social security numbers, that's not step one. And once they apply and it goes to NTN and comes back, the next step that we can do is to review it carefully. You get the report back, and I do that. I don't look at the score and say, oh, great, they have a 92 score out of 100 or 98 score, I'm approving them. No, you look at everything else also. What are their collections like? What is their criminal? What is their history of how they've paid, and what else do they have? Are they an individual use, or are they an authorized use on all this? How long has their credit been open? Are there like 48 inquiries in the last 3 months, 90 days? So look at everything once it comes back. Don't take shortcuts. So these are the two things I would say. And Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
What she said. That's really not much to add. I don't think I missed any part of. I don't think I can add anything to that.
Yes. So all I can tell everyone is don't take shortcuts, and that is the only recipe to success. And I can tell you my own experience. 4 years, I have not had an eviction or a skip because of the process I follow. And reach out to your screening company. I talk to Mike all the time. If I have any concerns about the screening report, I'm calling him or I'm emailing him. One of those, right? I'm always asking him, Mike, can you help me with this? So do that, and they're your partner in this. They'll help you. Your screening company will help you. So that way you bring in the best. Where you stop fraud or anything else is at the time of moving somebody at application. After they've moved in, it's too late. So I'm proud to say that I have not had any skips or evictions all the time that I've been managing my properties. I'm waiting for that to happen. It probably will, but any of my screenings, it has not happened so far. And I have good residents and they pay, and my collections are also at 100% all through COVID. I've not had any delinquency. We bring in good residents, so that's the first step.
Incidentally, you should be proud. Proud of that. That's something to absolutely stand up, and we should all clap for you.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, there's one more question that's come in. Can you expound on the fact that CPNs are not just focusing on stolen social security numbers, but also synthetic IDs? And also talk a little bit about the farm and cultivated trade lines that may be out there.
Oh, that's going to take a while to answer. Yes, I can. So so we'll start with this. CPN, also known as synthetic IDs, and that's the kind of the piece where you're out there buying a piece of I don't want to call it, well, we'll just call it synthetic material in a sense, right? And so we now have a social security number that's fake. We could use synthetic, and that's kind of what we're getting at. If that kind of answers the question, may have not interpreted that right. What was the other part of that?
Any information on farmed and cultivated trade lines?
Somebody's been on Google. So the idea is that these companies who are out there that are selling this information, so the data breachers, I'm going to call them kind of farmers, and they're grabbing all these bits and pieces and doing what they will and putting them in databases. Those databases are then disseminated to these other sort of, I don't know they're also farmers in my mind, but they're kind of more, they're going to start to sell the data, these bits and pieces that have come together, and then they're going to, that's kind of the farming analogy. Maybe not the best analogy that I can think of. We've got some slides that really will help to explain that. We will be doing a much longer, more detailed, exactly what we're talking about webinar in the future. But it's kind of like, it's almost like this trickle down effect. And so you start, and again, those that are mining the data that's breached, I'm going to call, they're really the farmers, and I'm just going to go in circles because I don't know what's better with the graphics. Sorry, call me. We'll talk about it.
Thanks, Mike. That looks like that's all the questions we had that came in at this time.
Awesome.
Okay, we give everyone else, we give everyone 9 minutes of their life back. Any other questions?
That's right. So,
If not,
you're welcome. See, we're here to save you some time.
That's right.
Well, if that's if there's nothing else to ask, talk about, etc., you can check that website out. I want to mention it again. It's trueandverified.com, trueandverified.com. And Supriya, any closing thoughts or ideas?
No, I think we did really well, and my closing thoughts are: the screening is really important. Make that your best friend. Don't cut corners there. That will be my biggest takeaway and biggest recommendation.
You heard it here.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Everybody, thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. See you next time. Thanks, Mike.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
April.